Stream be live.
Are we done with Kurt, or we got that still?
No, I think we're done
for now.
Done for now, man. And based on his text back to me today, we might be done.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll we'll explain it.
All fair, please.
Yep.
10.
He said he had a great experience with us, though.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah.
This is Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Here are your hosts, Dr. Tim Slekar and Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, educated educators talking education.
There it is, Monday. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Right away, the number's 855-752-4842. It's on a Monday. Somebody out there with some eagerness, jump in, give us a call right away. What do you want to talk about? Education, public education, democracy, advocacy, you name it, Johnny Lupinacci. We do it. The thing is we are, right now, we are, as far as we know, the only 5-day-a-week commercial radio show dedicated to public education and democracy right now. Just wanting to put that out there so that people go, wait, what's this Busted Pencils? Busted Pencils, man. It is a daily radio show where we get to talk about public education, democracy, teaching, learning, Friday night football, maybe even too, all kinds of things coming up. But, man, telling about it. And even in Finland, we talk about this in Finland. How do people in Finland hear about us, Johnny? The Civic Media app, dude. You know that.
Well, yeah, man. I'm just there's people all over the country, all over Wisconsin, right, listening to. It doesn't just pop from your local terrestrial radio station to Finland. It's an odd hour of the day in Finland. But yes, the Civic Media app is a wonderful way to tune into all your Civic Media programming. I guess while we're talking about all these things, Tim, we got a big week ahead of us.
Oh, we do.
We're still reeling from the DNC. Lots to talk about. All kinds of exciting action from educators that'll be participating in the show this week. We'll preview and sneak a little bit of that. But hey, just a reminder for listeners, this is the season. I mean, it's really always the season in a democracy, but this is a big one, right? It's like the playoffs leading to the championship in November. Be a voter. Tuesday, September 17th is National Voter Registration Day. Plan to check your voter registration and be sure you're ready for November 5th. I mean, that's the big game. You were talking about Friday night football, but Friday night football is always going to be here. We're going to talk a lot about how those kinds of, stalwarts of our community are part of public education for sure. But man, when you start talking about public education as the bedrock for a democracy, and what do we do in a democracy? Besides, offer our civic duty towards a government for the people, by the people. But one of our main things, like one of our feature activities is we vote. It doesn't just mean we go out and vote on voting day. There's all kinds of getting good information, having great conversations, asking tough questions, looking for transparency, honesty, accountability, right? Looking at policies and then saying, hey, it's time to go do our duty. And part of that is to make sure we're registered. So voter registration, National Voter Registration Day, September 17th. Get out and vote. I always like the campaigns, rock the vote, because we're rocking here at Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk.
Tim, I gotta tell you one of the things. I'm so excited. I just got in the mail today. My daughter, who is away at college full time, she did what she's supposed to do without me even telling her. She signed up for her absentee ballot and the fact that she can vote by mail. I got all of that today. I called her up. I was like, Lace, what's going on? She goes, oh, yeah, Dad, I took care of that. I went and did what I had to do. And I was just like, yeah, but those are the examples we talk about. It's like, hey, guess what? If you're away, you too can vote. There are absentee ballots. Vote by mail. Figure it out. What you said. Go and dig that information. Johnny, look at that right away, though, too, as we put out the call asking for calls. Cindy from Appleton right away, jumping in before we even get to the stuff. Cindy from Appleton, what's going on? What's your question? What's happening in your world?
Well, I'm a little concerned because remember what happened with Hillary and the criminal the first time around?
Mm-hmm.
She won the popular vote. She won the Electoral College votes, and I'm very concerned that that could happen again.
Could.
Are you worried though about that from the standpoint of what we said, like low voter turnout? Or are you concerned? I mean, what is the issue? Because
Well, maybe
go.
that's something you guys should educate people about, is the Electoral College and how it works. Because I myself am not sure how it works. All I know is whoever gets the most votes wins the Electoral College, or electoral votes. But to be honest with you, how they gather all these votes, I'm still a little rusty on. So that might be a topic for conversation.
Thank you, Cindy.
I love that. That's a great question. And that's true because it is kind of, I mean, we could talk about it and we can get into it, but it is certainly not logical when you think about how fair voting ought to really be, right? You think about, hey, you vote for a representative, the popular vote counts, right? But the Electoral College, I think, Tim, probably you and I both agree, needs to go away. But it's there in place, and it's there in place for exactly like Cindy was bringing up, to kind of be, it's supposed to be a safeguard. Is that what we might call it, Tim? Like they say it's a safeguard.
It's the protection against it's the protection against the uninformed masses voting too much.
Right. So let me give a little quick definition of the Electoral College, because I think Cindy's right. We should talk about this because one, we have some trauma around it. We've been like, hey, the majority of the voters have voted, but yet that's not that didn't determine the winner. What happened? You know, one of those. It's happened a few times in my voting lifetime where I've gone to bed pretty excited because I didn't exactly know how the Electoral College worked the first time. Remember that? Remember that Al Gore election, Tim?
Wah,
I woke up and it was like a totally different. I had to check my, self, pinch myself, and be like, wait, am I still sleeping? Did something happen? It sure did. But we can get into it. But the quick kind of way to think about it is the Electoral College consists of 538 electors, right? A majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect a president. Different states, right? So your state has the same number of electors as it does members in its congressional delegation. So you have one member in the House of Representatives plus 2 senators. One for each member in the House of Representatives plus 2 senators, right? So the states have different numbers of electoral, what do we call it? Electoral voters?
Electors.
Yeah, electors. So different states have different numbers of electors, and there are 538 total electors. And the majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect the president. So you're asking, why is Johnny saying this? Because don't we go and vote and they count up all the votes, right? That's why we see the state map when the election's going on, right? Because they're going to say, hey, this state has gone to this candidate, this ticket, and that means this many electoral votes. Our individual votes contribute towards possible electoral votes on the table, right? And so Cindy's call is really important because, man, high population areas could be swinging a particular way and go a particular way and not necessarily determine the presidential election because it's determined on electoral votes. Now, if it's a blue wave, let's call it that, or what do we want to say? If it's a brat election, right? Then we got nothing to worry about because it's not close. If it's close, this is where the Electoral College, and this is what Cindy, I think, is referring to, has had a different outcome than the popular individual votes. And this is why so many people, myself included, say things like, I think this Electoral College thing has got to go. Because you can't say we are a democracy. The people have voted. It's clear, right? It's not even like we need a recount. It's that close. It's clear.
Absolutely.
And that didn't do enough electoral voting. Electoral College is one way, and I'm going to go a little opinion, a little off fact, is one way to rig an election, but not quite rig an election. It's just like in there. In case it's close, don't worry.
It's
because
it's a subversion. It's a subversion of democracy in that sense when you're talking about popular democracy. And
But we should do more about it, Tim. Like, we'll continue to talk about the Electoral College because we do all have some trauma around it. Thanks, Cindy, for calling and bringing it up. We got LA Tom on the horn. I bet you he could tell us too about the Electoral College. What's up, Tom? You love the Electoral College?
Well, first off, guys, I'm a joyful democracy warrior, just like our soon-to-be president and vice president are. And I would like to say that, the other guy is just not a serious candidate for the presidency, and we really need to be honest about that. He's not serious about democracy. He's only serious about Project 2025 and him being a dictator. And I would recommend everyone watch The Handmaid's Tale if you want to see your future if we get him in office, because that's really what it's going to look like. In terms of the Electoral College, we need to get rid of the Electoral College.
There it is.
States like California, which are the largest state in the union, and it doesn't even really matter which way our votes go, which is really quite ridiculous. Also, like Johnny was saying, basically it's the number of House representatives that you have and your 2 senators that make up the number that comes to the electoral number of votes.
Mm-hmm.
And that can change every 10 years because of the census if people don't actually sign up with the census.
There it is. Right there, a little extra added to that, Johnny Lupinacci, your little civics lesson. Yeah. And that is, hey, guess what? Social studies educators, we always will dig deep into this. So Cindy, LA Tom, thanks for the calls, really getting us started off on that, Johnny.
So let's play a game real quick because this is fun. I like to do that anytime we're learning. We had a great recap of that from LA Tom, the Electoral College, right? Allocations are based on the census. So it is based on, right, the populations in states, right? So how are electors determined? Right. So we said that we had that kind of formula, right, of how they were determined. But how does it become unequal? Right. So how many are in California? How many votes, Tim? We know California has 54 votes. Right.
Right.
So California gets 54 votes. So at the end of at the end of the elections tallied up, they say California's gone this way. That's 54. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Possible electoral votes based. But it's a little more complicated because it carves up into sections. But let's talk about, for listener out there, because a lot of you are in the great state of Wisconsin. How many electoral votes are in Wisconsin?
John Lupinacci, that's a good question right now to kind of keep people on their seats right there.
I mean, I know the listeners know. If you don't, you're going to find out. Stay tuned. How many electoral votes are in the state of Wisconsin?
We growl. All over you. Yeah, Johnny, I think we opened the floodgates here because I see Keith is waiting, and I bet he's calling.
I like it.
This is fine. This is good stuff, man. It's social studies 101, civics 101. Here we go, man.
And so for people who are on the bonus content, right, we're in the quick break here. You think about it, to sum it up, in an electoral college where it exists, because LA Tom and I were like, it's got to go away. But one of the reasons why is it affords unequal voting power depending on where you live.
Population.
Right. So if you're an individual, let's say in Wyoming, counts nearly 4 times as much as a voter in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
That's because in Wyoming has 3 electoral votes for a population of around 530,000. And Texas has 32 electoral votes for a population of almost 25 million. So we're getting into the maths. What does math have to do with social studies? You can see really quickly that's disproportionate. That is unequal voting power depending on where you live. And that's kind of why LA Tom was saying in California, this is not fair. We have so many people that, we have 54 electoral votes, but we don't have like it's not the same as say someone in Ohio.
I love Mondays. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Little black flag there. Educated educators talking education. 855-752-4842. Johnny, looks like we might have, created a little bit of a learning opportunity right now for the
Cindy.
listener. Yeah, Cindy, thanks for getting this. Keith.
It's a great topic too. What's up, Keith?
Keith, what's happening?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I just wanted to throw something else out there, too, as far as the population of the states and representation. The big factor there is our senators. We each get 2 senators per state, whether we're California with, 80 million people or we're Wyoming with 80,000 people. So that brings into a big problem when we have, at least for us Democrats right now, the last 20 years when we have all of a sudden lost the Supreme Court drastically because there's just we don't have the as far as dominating the Senate, we don't have a big enough majority, and with the filibuster we can't get those things passed. So even a little state like Wyoming can be very, very important when they have 2 senators. So population's important.
Keith, Johnny, in fact, population's so important. Johnny, the question as we were coming out though to Wisconsin, how many electors Wisconsin, Johnny? Sherry says 9 from Wisconsin, 9 for Wisconsin. Johnny Lupinacci.
I thought it was 10, but that's off the top of my head, and I don't know it. I haven't looked it up for this election. It may have changed since the last big election when I was looking at what Wisconsin counted for. Let's type it in. Jess, let's do it. Let's figure it out. How many electors are in the state of Wisconsin? Good 10. State of Wisconsin. All right, I was right. 10. Sherry, you were close. 9, right? That's pretty big. But I like what our caller, was it Keith, brought up. Yeah. He gave also that example of Wyoming. Why I pulled Wyoming and Texas is that's the largest disparity. You have this highly populated state, Texas, right, with electors, and then you have, Wyoming, which is the least populated state ratio to electors. And so you have this huge gap, and where, Keith was saying these small states can really swing an election. Now, that's partly, to be fair, I mean, again, I'm saying like the electoral college has got to go already, all right? But some of the argument for it is that has been made the case that small states were given this kind of power, that this is not by mistake, right? It's actually, given to them to prevent politicians from only focusing on issues which affects the larger states, right? So this is an effort to balance things, which is kind of what you do in democracy. You try and figure out the best way to do these things. And when you find out that they're pretty flawed, then you say, come on, we're better than this. We have the great human capacity to have wild things like electric trucks that look like dumpster tanks. We could figure out a better way to do elections. I'm just saying that because I'm staring out my studio window and I just
doesn't mean it works.
I just saw one of those fancy electric dumpster trucks go by. You know what I'm talking about? I refuse to say the company's name. Not that I really have anything against that company, but I'm not always too excited about the guy behind the business. But I digress. Come back to it, right? In efforts to kind of balance power, that is why the electoral college is there, or the electoral vote kind of exists. The idea would be then politicians would just completely ignore Wyoming and they'd spend all their time in Texas, or they'd be in California, right? And they wouldn't come out to, Iowa, Nebraska, and other places. So all the states in the country matter. And so in efforts to kind of balance that, that's why it's there. But as Cindy reminds us, it is not just the popular vote. And just to recap, we were comparing Texas and Wyoming. For example, like Texas, right, has one elector for just about every, 700 to 800,000 people. Wyoming has one elector for every 150, 170,000 people. So you see, like, if you're in Wyoming voting, your vote, every 150,000 so people's vote goes to one elector.
You're a big puncher. Big
Texas,
wallet.
versus in Texas, you got to get up like 750, 800,000 votes to get that electoral move. Now, is there a perfect way to do this? No. Has the electoral college been a problem? Yes. So a lot of us do say, hey, let's get rid of it and let's go to a popular vote. I am not even sure that's the solution. All I know is that here's what I hope for, folks. A big landslide. Like, this election is a no-brainer. Gather your facts, figure out where you stand on things, vote how you vote. But if you're supporters of education, period, public education especially, but education, period, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You got one ticket that wants to do away with it and another ticket that's saying, like, hey, let's try and make it better. Seems like a no-brainer for us educators out there, although we still got to talk about all the policies. We're still going to contrast things because we do need to kind of make sure we're focused on, the big issues, making sure we're getting that information, and especially as it translates and transcends to trending things in education. Tim, so much
I know. Well, first of all, the Busted Pencils fully leaded education talk. Yeah, we're the educated educators talking education. In fact, making that transition, Johnny Lupinacci. Here's a big major study out last week from our friends at the Fordham Foundation. Johnny, you're not going to believe this, but hey, according to a study by the Fordham Foundation that is reported in K-12 Dive, there might be, and in fact, in their study, they seem like there seems to be some inclusion that the achievement gap has a connection to poverty in some way, shape, or form, that poverty has an influence in the achievement gap. Now, people are out there going, yes, this is Tim's sarcasm. Johnny, we know. Anybody out there, you do not have to call in to help Johnny through this sarcastic moment. He got it right away. He understood that we're making sometimes.
I did get distracted because you said Fordham and I said, how much do we need to be able to afford them? I don't know.
Oh,
and then we were talking about poverty, and it was more about what you can't afford and what you can't afford.
No,
and so back on the Fordham Institute, is this what you're talking about?
Fordham Institute, who is largely, for the most part, a cheerleader for what is called education reform that we've talked about over the last 40 years. Long history of advocating. In fact, advocating poverty don't matter, nothing, man. We need to get rid of those bad teachers. We need to get rid of bad curriculum. We need to get rid of bad books, all of those things, because, man, if you got rid of all of that stuff, you would actually make a difference in the achievement gap. Well, here it is now in 2024. The Fordham Foundation seems like they may have come across some research findings in their own research indicates.
And to be clear as we go through this, because Tim, I didn't get stuck on the sarcasm, but as you know, I'm kind of a fan of the Jesuit schools, and I know about Fordham, and I just want to separate the Fordham Institute, Thomas B. Fordham Institute, think tank, Ohio policy, that kind of business, separated out from the Jesuit institution, the Fordham University, right? And that's then where now if you got them, you can afford them. Then let's go. Let's get back to it. When we're here, Busted Pencils, we'll unpack this some more.
Don't stop us. It's no use. Rise above, rise above, rise above. We're gonna rise above. We're gonna rise above. We're gonna rise above.
What is Cam giving us here? Oh, James. Jameson texted us. Here's what's crazy about the Electoral College. It would happen in the current state of affairs, but one could be elected president with 23% of the popular vote.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
That's a great example. Like it could go that way. Like do the math. It could happen that way. It hasn't, but it could.
But it could.
Yeah.
And then Cam made a website last week for LA Tom.
What? I love this. Cam and LA Tom working together, man. That's a beautiful thing.
Let's see.
You're on the bonus. You get to hear that. You know, we get a stream of texts into the station too, and you might be one of those texters yourself. But I love that, man. That's small. That's hometown radio.
There it is.
Building community. You got LA Tom and Cam connecting, and Cam building a website for LA Tom.
I clicked on it right now. It's waiting, but I cannot wait to see it. Yes, Johnny, good clarification too on Fordham, the university, versus Fordham, the think tank, largely conservative think tank. Big promoter.
Nothing to do with each other.
Nothing to do at all with each other.
Right.
So anybody
school where? New York, I think. Fordham,
New York City.
Yeah.
You know.
And then the Thomas B. Fordham Institute.
Mm-hmm. Big think tank. Big difference.
Big heavy hitter in the world of policy, especially ed policy. American conservative nonprofit education policy think tank.
They think tank. Michael Petrilli.
Indoctrinating, although they point the fingers and say, you know, don't let schools be indoctrinated. And it's like, hold on, have you read any of your materials? They are prime example of, I don't know. I mean, I think I might go as far. I'm on a bender this Monday today.
Yeah, you are, man.
Should I say? I think it's propaganda qualifying, but at the very least, well, I might consider, you know, the reports from the Fordham Foundation as propaganda based. At the very least, they are intentionally indoctrinating and ideologically conservative. Mm-hmm. And I would say that about a similar material. If it was ideologically radical, I would say this, you know, this is material that is indoctrinating and ideologically radical. There are materials that exist like that. So I'm not just picking on conservatives, but I will say for me, I'd put it in my stack labeled propaganda.
Propaganda. One of the other interesting things right now about the Fordham Foundation, big advocates of privatization in school choice. However, right now they are one of the conservative areas going, you know what, universal school choice. They're getting a little bit concerned about that because the Fordham Foundation truly was this one that always said school choice creates better academic results. And so the idea of giving money to anybody to go to really crappy schools, they're thinking it's going to tarnish the choice brand. So if anybody's remembering that, yes, Michael Petrilli, who is typically their choice cheerleader, has been cautioning that full 100% parental choice is something we need to be worried about. One of the few places you're going to hear that from there. I'm still spinning on LA Tom's website, but you know,
Cam,
you
send us the most delightful pictures. Yes. We just got a picture of a gorgeous little pup with a wig and some big gold hoops. 1 minute.
Yes, for a moment I almost thought that's an interesting picture of a cow.
I also thought it was a cow for a second.
Okay, good. It wasn't just me.
No, the big eyes and the shape of the snoot.
Yeah, but now you look close. It's like that's a black lab right there. Black lab right there with a hairpiece and some big earrings.
And it looked like, why is this on my head?
Well, that dog look of going, oh my God, they do this to me all the time. Okay.
20 seconds.
I'm going to try that. Cam gave me another link to try.
Can you try that after the show since we're coming back in like 10 seconds? Thank you.
Yep.
And knowing Cam, it's going to play something weird.
BustED Pencils, it's fully leaded education talk. It's truly educated educators talking education. Got a lot of participation right away. Cindy, LA Tom, Keith calling in. Yeah, we were talking about the Electoral College. We're moving on to that, though, kind of talking about new findings out of the Fordham Institute, not to be confused with Fordham University, the Jesuit institution in New York City. But, hey, guess what? It comes out right now, and poverty, or they don't call it poverty in their research, they call socioeconomic factors may influence the academic achievement gap. Jess,
Yeah,
you gotta look.
they weren't willing to go all the way and say does. They
Right.
said, well, our it wasn't fully conclusive, but
Right.
socioeconomic factors might
Might.
influence academic outcomes.
In fact, if
Maybe.
you read very much all the way to the end, one of the most strongest indicators they point out is parental income, which the last time I checked, parental income has something to do with poverty.
Yeah, typically. Since most kids aren't bringing home the family income. We hope that they aren't.
Right. So the fact that how much money your parents make and the education of your mom, throw those two together, which are, guess what? Those are truly socioeconomic indicators, or potentially saying, and when you don't have a lot of socioeconomic indicators, such as high parental income and high parental or mother college attainment, guess what happens? The achievement gap, particularly for the racial achievement gap for Black, white, and Hispanic students, gets expanded, Johnny Lupinacci.
Yeah, here's the thing, Fordham. Sorry, a little bit too little, way too late. We've known this for we have evidence, we have research evidence for decades now, and it goes longer than that.
Right.
That socioeconomic factors, and I'm going to say that's also code language for like what Tim's talking about, like the systemic way poverty exists in this country, the lack of access to healthcare, the living in food. Food deserts, the lack, the young people who don't have access, young animal people who don't have healthcare access, right? The ways that we fail communities, right? So that's like it. Socioeconomic is just like kind of an uppity, fancy way, right? That distances us from the real ways people are suffering in communities that are intersectional, that are very based, oftentimes in this country, on race, on gender. Right. And on the systems of poverty that so many young children are born into. Right. So, but for decades and decades, I can remember when I was first becoming a teacher 20 some years ago, I had a professor, and you could tell him the family income of a household, and he could tell you within a tenth of a point what that student would get on their ACT and SAT. He had mathematical algorithms that could give you you input an income and a combined family income out of a household, put it into the computer, right down to the last kind of thing. He can tell you exactly what that kid's score is, know nothing about them, never have looked at their grades, and be accurate to within a tenth of a point. So this is the way that, like, we have known for a really long time. It doesn't really matter who you are, right? The systems are stacked in a way where if you're born into poverty, you have uphill the whole way. You have no opportunity to pick yourself up from the bootstraps, as so the myth might tell. The system is designed. Now, occasionally, like winning the lotto, people make it. And do they work hard? They sure do, Tim. So I don't want to take that away from those folks, the listener out there who's like, man, wait, I was poor when I was young and I've worked really hard. I wouldn't exactly call myself not poor now. Like, I think most people in America probably listening aren't exactly identifying as billionaires, millionaires, or wealthy to say, but they sure worked hard. But it doesn't work for everyone. In fact, if you are at a disadvantage when you're born or in the community you're in, you will likely stay at or go lower than that level in this country, and that's a sad thing. So a little bit too little, way too late, Fordham. And sorry, doesn't annul you of your sins in my book. Some of us who are familiar with this. Oh man, what's that? That's the Democracy in Action bell. Every day at the same time, at the 40-minute mark in the hour, we ring the bell, and that signals that we are going to award the Democracy in Action Award today's Democracy in Action Award, you know what? It goes to everybody who values justice. That's working not too little, not too late, right? So I know there are a lot of people out there say, cut them some slack. The Fordham Institute is finally agreeing with us. Well, I'll tell you what, the us way back then, and it wasn't even me, it's generations before me who were saying, you know what, this is systemic. Poverty matters and we can do something about it. And when we do something about it, it changes lives. It improves our entire country. And it starts oftentimes at education and healthcare and early childhood, kinds of ways. And to systemically ignore that, especially and to ignore that in marginalized communities, I hate that term. It should be people who have been excluded from the power and privilege that the political majority has held for far too long. But, we often refer to those as minority groups. Don't like that language, but that'll help identify, have suffered disproportionately and are more likely to experience factors of poverty. So Fordham, a little bit too little, a little bit too late. So Democracy in Action Award, those are core democratic values that support democracy. Go to everybody who was justice the whole way. Now, tiny little violin playing for poor Fordham, who's saying, what about us? What about us? We're seeing it finally. Say, okay, we hear you. And I like this, though. Our producer, Jess, reminded us, hey, a step in the right direction is a step.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Credit to do it.
But Johnny, you pointed out too the prediction ability of socioeconomic, and just a reminder for people, we have had on the show Christopher Tenkin from Seton Hall, who has really come in to say, you want to know what your test scores are going to be. All he needs are a few socioeconomic factors, very much like you said, Johnny, and his ability to predict the test scores before the students take the tests. He can do that without knowing anything other than a few socioeconomic factors. I think that is really, again, pointing that out. But, the other part here too is that we talk about this often. How do you make sense of media? And this is one of those things, the education media here, Johnny, and the title of this article. I'm going to put the title out here: Socioeconomic Factors Partially at Play in Racial Achievement Gaps. Partially at play. So you can hear right there, there's kind of this hedging. I don't know, maybe. All the way to the end of the article, though, the findings. Household income was the biggest contributor to the black-white achievement gap. Okay, so how do you go from the household income being the biggest, and you have a headline, Jess, that says, well, partially.
I mean, technically, Tim, 90% is partial.
I guess this is one of those where you're just like, you're kidding me, right? And typically, so this kind of also comes a little bit of a critique for K-12 Dive, who put this out there. They're the ones who titled this piece from, and again, the research they're citing is coming out of the Fordham Foundation. And I know the Fordham Foundation probably said, hey, can you give us a title that's a little bit more up our alley? Socioeconomic partially at play. Hey, and you know what? And by the end of the article, which most people don't read to the end of the article, you could throw in there that big household income was the biggest contributor to the black-white achievement gap. And Johnny, as you point out too, how many people listening right now are going, duh, we already knew this. It's like, yeah, and that's why we're putting it out there, though, too, is to say, though, our advocacy and the continuing talking about this and laying out the realities that these are the things that truly affect academic achievement. If you really are concerned about students doing well in school, hey, now finally, after 40 years of yelling that poverty don't matter, the reality is that poverty does matter. We have been saying that for going on 40 years now. In fact, the advocacy that we have been putting out there, I would take this as an accomplishment that we have finally pushed an organization like the Fordham Foundation to actually square with the true research and the research findings out there that says, hey, when you're dealing with academic achievement, you got to look at household income. And man, guess what? One of their other recommendations, though, too, boy, I mean, talk about a big one, but early childhood education should be well funded. Yeah, just
What?
Womp, womp, womp.
Really?
Old news, man. Hey, and when it's cold outside, you may be cold. And when it's
You
hot
might
outside,
need a
you may
hat
experience
when
heat.
it's cold.
You stand in the rain, you might get wet.
it's one of those.
Thank you, Fordham Institute.
One of those. We put it out there. So,
Brilliant
yeah,
insights.
You invest in children and their well-being, and they grow up to be. They have a better chance of being well-adjusted, contributing members of a democracy. Fancy that.
Incredible.
Well, and in fact, Johnny, that is one of the insights in there too, is that the investment that you have pointed out many times, that the reason we're doing these things are the investments early on, and we know they pay off in the long run. So guess what? An investment in early childhood education, early childhood interventions. Now, they don't go in besides the early childhood education. They don't talk about the early childhood interventions that we might point out that would be, you know, like you said, access to food, healthy food. That would be something also that is, you know, maybe part of high quality early childhood education, maybe not. We don't know. Maybe if you're in Minnesota and part of the governor there, who's now the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, Tim Walz, where they said, you know, they're not banishing books in Minnesota. They're banishing hunger, free breakfast and lunch for those kids, because guess what? That issue, that economic condition, hunger, big contributor to the academic achievement gap. So we're going to go after that. Healthcare, yeah, shelter, all of these issues that may or may not necessarily be included in early childhood advocacy. Because, and this is where, again, so Fordham, if you're saying that all kids need access to, quote, preschool with an academic curriculum, I'm not so sure that that's exactly what your research is saying. Your research is saying poverty, anti-poverty issues connected to early childhood education. Because, Johnny, there's actually a pretty good amount of research out there that early childhood education without the intervention of poverty reduction actually doesn't go that far. It doesn't go that far because it just doesn't, because we go back to the number one idea, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you need food, shelter, healthcare, and clothing to actually survive in this world, that's just to survive in this world, then you want to start moving up to the thriving categories of Maslow's hierarchy, where you got to do a little bit more. But to get up there to that learning, that self-actualization, you got to have things like food, healthcare, hunger, shelter, all of those things. So Fordham, okay, wow, we got it there. One more other trending news issue here as we're coming up on this. So Johnny, back up in our wheelhouse. This has been a bit of a social studies day right here. But guess what? One of the better ways to actually teach kids how to think critically, they can actually get into a discussion of where did this history content come from? So in other words, why do we learn about Martin Luther King last year? And why is this year Martin Luther King Jr. considered a controversial subject? Hey, let's study how history standards are made, because that might actually give us into insight. Makes me ask the question, though, would that be considered a subversive activity, actually teaching why Martin Luther King didn't make the cut? Hey, we'll figure it out more. Hold on.
Fox reports, poor instantly rich. We call it America, whoa! 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 We call it America.
Perfect music bit, too.
Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry to spook you. I saw that. I was like, man, Johnny looked like he was really afraid there.
No, it was just loud in my ears. It could also be my headphones. But I switched to a different set of headphones, and
No, my fader was up a little too high.
it was
and
loud.
You didn't expect it. You didn't see my note in the chat that I was gonna hit it.
Hey, I'm a little out of practice. Last week was only one show. You know what happened?
I know we're a little rusty. We're a little rusty. It's okay.
Rusty.
You're
I'm
shaking
all
it off.
up. Probably should have had coffee. I'm uncaffeinated. This is me uncaffeinated, by the way. It's like for those if
30.
you don't have extensive experience with ADHD people.
We get a little spacey when we don't have the caffeine and we don't notice everything.
We need that. We need that.
You need the focus juice.
Yeah.
I was sitting out on my front porch in 92
This
degrees, drinking a hot cup of coffee today.
As you should be.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something real nice about sitting out on a hot porch drinking a hot cup of
Hot
coffee.
coffee.
Only one way to drink your coffee.
5.
And that's hot until it's sat out, and then it's room temp, and then it's not as good.
There it is. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Numbers 855-752-4842. It is a Monday. Yeah, man, we're back. Hey, Democratic National Convention. There was still a lot there. You're always welcome to call in and talk about that some more, but we're moving forward here. Jumped in, though, the beginning of the show, Electoral College, moving into, hey, guess what? Poverty matters. Whoa. And we found that out that poverty actually has always mattered. But it is nice to see.
And you know what? We've been talking a lot about before the DNC, and it came up some through that. So we can move background, but we are talking a lot about, the second Bill of Rights, or, understanding like a FDR kind of commitment to eliminating poverty and really, making this a place for people to have sort of not so low of a floor. Come on, man. Like we really it shouldn't be easy to fall off. Well, as you know, listener, it's not easy to stay not falling off in this country. It's hard to make ends meet. I mean, there was a day like, the generation ahead of me would tell me, oh, you should take certain percentage of your paycheck, put it here and save it and all this. And, I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to do that. Well, most of the grown-ups I know are pretty much paycheck to paycheck in this country, some even thinner than that. And you know what? That's very different than the experience of past generations. And that is not because generations said, hey, let's make it harder on these guys. We neglected to think about how hard it is to make ends meet in this country. And we've accepted that to varying degrees. So I like this movement of an indignance to that condition. I like that young people are saying, you know what? No way. Enough. We need to be better. We need to do better. And so I'm optimistic, Tim. But it reminds me of like that commitment to human rights, that second Bill of Rights we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We brought it up a lot. An FDR-esque agenda. You're getting at that. Like the Kamala Walls ticket has that. There are lots of local elections that resonate, right, with those sounds. How do we make this country livable for everybody, right? Not just for some, not just for the people who have the most money or who were born into, economic security, but for the majority, everybody who ought to be able to have those base needs met. Like you said, when we teach about what is we teach a science lesson, like what's habitat, food, water, shelter, space, right? Nothing radical, nothing leftist about that. Food, water, shelter, space. The squirrel, what's the squirrel's food, water, shelter, space? Right. In early elementary, we teach about habitat and science.
Squirrel.
Let's talk about that habitat in our communities, right? Food, water, shelter, space.
Last thing.
Those 4 things that are essential to our living, that are some of the most expensive and unaffordable things in our community. Food, water, shelter, space. Okay. So I want to get back to those things. Let's really dial in on those, Tim. But you know what? We have a theme. 20th century, last week's theme, right? I liked it a lot. Contribute to good causes, right? We're doing it for the cause. Well, hopefully you're supporting your vote, your local folks running for elections. So it's elections on the air. So that's a no-brainer. Get out there, support those causes. But also, Tim, like what kind of print news do you get? Where do you get your information from, right? How do you contribute to good causes? The journalists, the writers, the people who are out there truth telling, right? So looking to find facts. You were talking about teaching history, right? And the importance of bringing facts into our classroom. Where do you get your facts from? Where do we get our information? Where do we get diverse perspectives that are real and honest, contribute to good causes? I know one for me, Tim, I'll share.
Okay.
Rethinking schools.
There you
I'm
go.
always working on being a better teacher and sharing that with other teachers. For me, the cause, right, is justice. I like that cause, justice. And Rethinking Schools, they're providing, print resources I can have in my classroom. I can look at, I can read. We're not sponsored by them. This is a non-sponsorship plug. Really, I'm just actually sharing.
No,
That's one of my causes. I really look to that. Tim, what's one of yours?
Yeah, it's a great cause. Well, if you're talking about too, where do you get that information? And one of the things I do is that I actually have, I do the intentional multiple source looking at, and along with CNN, MSNBC. Guess what? I don't know that this is as much as contributing to a cause, but I do pull up those other ones, Fox News occasionally, because I need to get that sense of realizing how we're going to put together a conversation. But you know what? Independent journalism, though, too. I've got quite a few Substack, subscriptions for
Man,
some.
I'm going to ask you to share those with our listeners this week, Tim, because I myself need to know a few more of them.
Yeah. Well, and I'd point out one right now. A great guest on our show, John Warner, who's been on very often, talking about writing. But I mean, again, his independent journalism right there. And so can you contribute to those authors out there who are digging deep to find information that isn't going to make K-12 Dive or CNN or anything like that? Doesn't mean
bad places to get.
No, it doesn't mean that, but it means that there is a lot of great stuff out there, and say, guess what, too? You know what? You wanna know a good cause? Listening to Busted Pencils, Johnny, every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, downloading the Civic Media app, making sure that you're always informed, taking the Busted Pencils podcast and sharing that with your neighbors. That's contributing to a good cause, Johnny Lupinacci.
Yeah, speaking about a good cause and really good, strong effort coming out of your old neck of the woods, man, we got a banger of a show tomorrow. Tim, who do we got tomorrow?
Hey, man, check it out, though. We've been, really saying national teacher shortage. We say it's a teacher exodus. What can you do? We started this way back 3 years ago talking to Austin Peay State University in Tennessee, their Grow Your Own program, teacher apprenticeship. Man, it's catching fire. Edgewood College in the city of Madison, Wisconsin, Edgewood College in the city of Madison, Wisconsin, together with Madison Metropolitan Schools, has put together a Grow Your Own partnership where they are looking at saying, guess what? Our teachers, they already work for the school district. We just need to give them the access. How does that happen? Hey, we got the Edgewood College, Madison Metropolitan School District people tomorrow night, Busted Pencils, talking about growing their own teachers. Tune in tomorrow. Johnny Lupinacci, Jess, you guys are awesome. Fire!